I'd now like to go through exercise 4.2. This is for IOE 463 measurement, design, and work. You can find the assignment on the Canvas site. Basically, it calls for us to construct a top view of a shop. The shop has nominal dimensions of 10 meters by 18 meters by 6 meters. We're only going to use the length and the height of the shop for this exercise. In subsequent exercises, we'll also redo this in 3D, and then we'll need the height for that part of the exercise. We're going to construct a conveyor in the middle of the shop, and then there will be 4 benches on each side of it, and on one side we're going to populate the benches with workers who have average female stature. They have 5 percentile female stature and average proportions. On the other side, we'll populate it with stick figure representations of workers with 95 percentile male stature and average proportions. So with that, let's go to Autocad, and I'm going to demonstrate this exercise using Autocad for Mac, so Autocad 2022. And we just finished an exercise where we created top views and side views of the worker standing at a workbench that's 0.9 meters high or 900 millimeters high, and has a top view size of 1,000 by 2,000 or 1 meter by 2 meters dimensions. And then we've used these stick figures to generate arcs to show how far somebody could reach and actually touch something on the surface of that bench. Now, one of the last things we did was to actually create an external file with the stick figure for the 5 percentile female stature and the bench that we will subsequently import into our shop view. Okay, so I'm going to create a new layer here for making our shop. And if you look at the directions for the shop, you'll see that they're given, the dimensions are given in meters. So I'm going to set my dimensions for meters for this one. I'll just come up down here and I'm going to type units. And we'll use decimal. We'll round off our units. So let's round them off to the nearest meter for now. We can change that later if we need to. And we'll come down here instead of inches, the default inches, we'll come down here and check meters. Okay, and again, these can be changed anytime, and we'll take the defaults and everything else. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is just jump in and start drawing. And again, we can start anywhere on this, even though it shows the 0, 0 coordinates, or coordinates down here. We'll just come up here some arbitrary distance away from these so we don't have this little XY icon interfering with our visibility of the drawing. First thing I like to do is actually construct an outline of the shop floor, because that kind of defines the outer dimensions of my drawing. So I'll just come out here up to the right a little bit, start a rectangle, come over here, and then I'll just type the length of the shop, which we said was 18 meters by 10 meters. So that's 18, 10. And that gives me basically what the top view of the shop would look like. And I'm going to come back and add more detail to this later, but this will be fine to get us started. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on this. So I'll just type Z for zoom, A for all, and then maybe bring this back down with my mouse by pressing on the center mouse wheel and kind of center it in the screen. Now let's create some layers here. This is going to go into a layer we'll call shop. So I'll come down here over here to the layers window, and I'll create a new layer, and I'll just simply call it shop. Okay, right there. Then I'll come back to my shop. I'll select the shop, and then I'll come down to the properties window and go to where it says layer, and I'll change that to where it says shop. Okay, and that that should get it into the shop view for me. I'll come back here and let's just make sure that is in fact in the shop view. Well, actually what I'll do is I'll come up here, hit escape. I'm going to hide the shop layer and see if it disappears, and it disappeared. Okay, that's great. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is create my conveyor, and we're going to put that in a layer called conveyor. So let's make a layer right now and we'll call it conveyor. I won't have to mess around moving it later. Okay, return. Then I'll come up here to the top of my windows or my layers window, and I'll come down and I'll make conveyor active. Now the layer, according to the directions, has dimensions of 12 meters long, 0.9 meters high, and 0.75 meters wide. Again, we don't need to worry about the height right now because this is just a 2D top view. And we've also got 5 centimeter rollers that we want to put on there. So let's go ahead and create the footprint for our conveyor. And I'll get the rectangle tool again and start here in the lower corner. And I'm just going to come up and make this, and I could do this anywhere, but I just started with making it in the corner of the drawing. So I'm going to come over here and make this 12 meters by 0.75. Okay, so that's what the top view of my conveyor would look like. Now I want to move it to the center of the drawing, and since I know the dimensions, I could use my move tool and calculate how far I have to move it to the right and how far I have to move it to the left. But there, I can use my snap functions for this, and this will make life a little bit easier. So let's come down here and check our snap function. So I'll go to settings, the drafting settings, and I'll go to object snap. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate the snap on geometric center. Okay, and then I will up a little bit and make sure after you select that you click on OK. So now I'll use my move tool. I'll type move. Then I'll select the conveyor. Right, return. Now I can come down here and notice I can move this into the geometric center of the conveyor lights up when I get close to it, and makes it easy for me to select that as my base point. So I'll click on that, and then I'll just kind of start dragging this up here and kind of hunt for, let me come over to the side so it knows I'm looking at the floor plan. And you notice then the geometric center of the floor pops up, and that's all I got to do to move that to the center. Again, that geometric center is a really convenient snap function. And then I'm going to come back and turn off that function just so it doesn't interfere with looking for some of these other reference points that we'll be looking for later. So I'll just go OK on that one. So now the next thing is let's put our rollers on here. Now the rollers have a circular cross section, but we're looking at it from a top view, so they'll just look like rectangles. And they'll be basically a rectangle with a length equal to the width of the conveyor and 5 centimeters horizontally. So let's zoom in on this. We'll start here on the left end. I'll blow this up so I can see it. And I will get a rectangle tool. I'll start in this corner, and I'll come up, and I want to come over 0.05 meters. 0.05, comma, and then I want to go up 0.75. So there is the top view of my roller. Now, it's from the way I've constructed it so far, it looks like just a a rectangle. So let's fill in and give it a little bit of shape. And to do that, I'll use the hatch tool. So I'm going to type hatch, H-A-T-C-H, and you'll see when I do that, I get a menu across the top, and you can see I can select different hatch patterns with different spacing, and I can scale them and change the angle and so forth. But I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to take the one that says solids, and then I'm going to select a color, which is right here. And I want to make this a kind of a light gray so it looks like a silver machine color roller. So let's just select rollers, and we'll just take something maybe like this. Okay. All right, now the next thing I have to do is select the polygon that I want to shade. So I'll come into the center of the roller, and voila. I'll hit return to tell it I'm done with my hatch. Now, one thing to keep in mind, when you use the hatch function to create a fill like this, Autocad will treat the boundary or the rectangle as one object, and it will create the hatch or the fill as a separate object. And we want to keep them together for reasons that will become apparent later on as we start to make extra rollers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of these, make sure they're both selected, and then I'm going to use the command or tool group, which will actually link these together. So whenever I click on this object, I'll get both the fill and the rectangle that makes the border. Now, you may recall before we used the copy command, and I could make copies and just essentially make a bunch of rollers here. But if you do the calculations, if we space these 0.1 meter apart, this is 12 meters long, we'd have to do the copy and move 120 times, so that would be pretty tedious. So we got another tool we can actually use for this. It's called the array tool, and the array tool is really powerful, but it is a little bit tricky, so bear with me if I make a mistake here. So I'm just going to type array. Well, excuse me, let me select the object first. You can select it afterwards, but it's a little easier if you start with it selected first. So I'm going to go array. All right, and it wants to know, is this going to be a rectangular array, or is my array going to follow a path, or is it going to follow polar coordinates? So I'm going to select rectangular. And right away, you can see that it makes, starts my array. And from the, if I zoom out on this a little bit, you'll see that by default, it gives me an array with 4 columns and 3 rows. But I don't want extra rows, I just want the columns in this case. So I'll come up here where it's got the rows, and I'm going to change this to 1. So now I've got 1. And now I can specify the distance, the number of rollers I want. Let's zoom in on this a little bit so you can see this a little better. And you'll notice that it's actually got some handles on it. That's the square and these 2 little diamonds. If you click on the first one, it'll say select group or select grip to edit the array. If I select on the next one, it'll say select grip to select grid to edit array, and then the last one says select grip to edit array. Well, the first one, if I click on it up here, it'll say how many columns do I want. You can see the default's 4. So before I do that, let me come back to this one, and you can see this one when I position over it, it actually shows me the distance between the arrays. And I'm going to want to make sure that this is set to, I'll just click on that, and I'm going to set this to 0.1. It'll look like that. So now I've got my rollers, 5 centimeter diameter rollers with 5 centimeters between each one. Now I'll come down here to this last one, and I'll click on this, and it says column count. And if you do the math with 5 centimeter rollers spaced 0.1 centimeter apart, 12 meter roller, that should translate to 120 rollers. And now I can zoom out a little bit, and you'll see I've populated that whole array. And that's much easier than, certainly easier than drawing these one at a time, and certainly easier than doing the copy command that we looked at a minute ago. So there's our conveyor, and if I come back and click on the shop, so you can see that again. Oops, it still thinks that I'm in the array command, so let me escape out of that. So I'm basically done. And by the way, you can click on individual roller, and you can go back and edit these if you want to change the diameter of your roller, if you want to give it a texture or something like that. So now, and if you edit the one, it'll has heredity, and it'll change all of them in the array. So now you can see I've got the shop, and I've got my roller conveyor in the middle. The next thing to do is put the workbenches along the side. So we can draw our workbenches the same way we did in exercise 4.1, but one of the powerful aspects of using a CAD tool like this is that once we've created something, we don't have to redo it. We can actually export it, store it in a separate file, and bring it back in, and that's exactly what we did when we created the wblock command earlier on. So let me zoom out in on this a little bit. Let me hide the shop view, and let's go ahead and create a another layer, and we're going to call this. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm just going to leave that empty. I'm going to go back to the base layer, and I'll show you why in just a sec. Okay, so let me move this down out just a little bit. So, since I've had some experience with this, I can have a little better idea what's kind of optimal on this. So to import a block now, we talked about the W block. I can go up here at the top where we have the layer, the tab for the layers window. And if we go over to the far right, you'll see there's another layer that says blocks. And if I click on that, you'll see that it actually has the block that we created in the previous exercise. Now it just happens to be here because I didn't completely close AutoCAD before I finished the other or since I finished the other drawing. If you don't see it here, you can always go to File up here and go to Import, and you can import it directly that way as well. But since it's here, we'll just grab it. So I'm going to take the 5% top view, and you notice when I bring this in, look at what happens. I get a, it just kind of wants to drag. And remember how we designated that upper right corner as the insertion point. And that's really important because sometimes people forget that. And what it'll do is it'll take the origin, so there'll be a big displacement between the point where you want to insert it and the place where the file is actually hovering in space. So I'm going to come out here to this far point, right there, and click on it. And what I've done is I've inserted my top view of the bench using that block tool. Now I'm going to, it's pointed the wrong direction, so let's go ahead and use the rotate tool to rotate it. I'm just going to type rotate, and it'll ask me to select the object, so I'll select the block here. Oops, there it goes. Return. Select my reference point or base point, which will be the corner where I inserted it. And now I specify a rotation angle, so it's going to be 90 degrees right there and 180 degrees. So I can get about there on, let's type 180. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, two things, it's still not quite in the position where I want it. Let me zoom out just a bit. It's kind of hanging over the end of the workbench, and we kind of want to even the end of the workbench. We also specify in the exercise that there should be a 10 centimeter gap between the edge of the conveyor and the edge of the workbench. So we're going to use our move command. So I'll select the bench, and I will type return until I'm done selecting. So specify a base point. So I'll come down here, let me zoom in on it, make sure I'm getting the base point of the bench and not part of my conveyor or one of the rollers. Click on that, and I can move it. Actually, I must have defaulted to rotate, so let me do this again. Make sure I hit escape and start with a blank command window, and I'll type move. Okay. Select the move, select the object, return. Select the corner of the bench, and I'll move it horizontally. We'll move it, let's see, we got to move it 1 meter. 1. And so we just moved it horizontally, so it's got the end of it aligned properly, but now we want to move it up, so I'll do move again. Select the box. You could have done these at the same time, but it's a little simpler some ways if you do it in each direction separately. I'll move this up, and I'll go 0.1. Okay, great. So now I've got the first bench in the position. Now again, I could follow my example with the rollers, and I could make an array. It would be basically a array with 1 row and 4 columns. But in this case, it's probably just as quick to just use the copy command. So I'm just going to go copy, and I will select the object, type return. And I can pick any point on this because all I want to do is make sure there's a 2-meter gap in this. So since the bench is 1 meter deep, that means the spacing is going to be 3 meters. So I'll click on one corner here, and I'm just going to move this way, and I'll type 3. Okay, there's the first one. And I'll come down here, and it's probably helpful if you turn on the ortho tool for this, but I didn't, so I'll just be careful. I'll type 6 for this one, and then I'll come down and do the next one, and this one will be 9. And then I'll type return until I'm done. Oops, and you can see, I told you I should have used the zoom tool or the ortho tool, because you can see I didn't quite get it lined up correctly. Do what I say, not what I do. Let me just erase that, and I'll just use the move tool, but I'm going to turn on the ortho tool here just by clicking on it down here, and I will just go copy. Okay, now I'll click on the object, or on the bench, and 5 percentile worker. Okay, got it selected. Click on the corner here. Okay, now you can see it's it's much easier to keep it aligned. And I'll type 3. Okay, there we go, and type return. Wow, I see what I did. When I got it positioned, I actually typed it twice, and so let me just undo that. I think if I do no, let's go to move. Okay, so I have not moved. Copy, C-O-P-Y. All right, return, select the bench. Get a lot of practice here with copy and commands. Okay, return, specify base point. And hopefully it's obvious. I'm going to move it 3. Return. And see, it kind of wants to. It's jumping off scale there. Return. Usually it's not this difficult. Let's see. Let's zoom in on it a little bit too. That'll make life a little bit easier. So move. Copy. Copy and move are kind of the same, except in one case it leaves a footprint where it was, in another case it doesn't. So let me select the object. Select the base point. Just make sure it's moved in this direction without jiggling it. 3. And that should do it. Okay, let's see if I got that. Yep, okay, there I got it. Okay, so now you can see the benches along the side of the conveyor, which is what you were asked to do in the assignment. Now, I started to put this into layers, and I kind of backpedaled and said, no, you don't need to really do that. Let's look at what happens. You'll notice that when we created these drawings originally, we had the bench and the worker in separate layers. And when we imported this, it actually brought the layer convention with it. So you can see that there's a F5 layer with the worker in it, and there's also a bench layer with a bench in it. So you can come back and start turning these on and off. So I'll turn the shop back on. Let's hide the workers. They go away. I can hide the benches. I can hide the conveyor. Okay, so there's one more thing to do. We want to finish our shop. Okay, so we got the shop laid out here now. So let me hide this other stuff, just get it out of my way for a minute. And we're going to make the shop layer active. Okay, so there's my shop. If you look at the directions, you'll see that it says the walls of the shop should be 25 centimeters thick. So I could draw another polygon around this, with the outer one then being displayed, the sides being displaced enough to create a 25 centimeter wall. I can do that very easily by using the offset command. And you'll see how this works. I'll just type offset, specify a distance, so we want 25 meters, 0.25 for 25 centimeters. And I will, this is select the object to offset. It'll be this polygon representing the walls of the shop. And I want this to be the displaced outward, so I'll just kind of pull this outside of the rectangle representing the shop and click return. And now I've got my shop showing the walls. So So that's really simple. And you can use the offset command with any kind of closed polygon, and it'll give you the offsets. And there's quite a few variations on it, which you may find helpful. Okay, now next thing, let's find we're asked to put a door in it, and it says the door should, in one end of it, and it says the door should be 4 by 4 meters. So we'll put it in this end down here, and I'll just get the rectangle tool, and I can put this anywhere. I'll just kind of start down here with the corner, and I'll come out to the right 0.25, and I'll bring it up 4 for the width of the door. And there's a rectangle representing the door, but it's it's not in the right place. So let's use the move tool. I'll go move, and I'll select the rectangle I just made. I'll type return, and let's move it. I'm going to snap on the midsection, midpoint on one side, and I'll bring this up here, and I'll move it to the the midpoint of the outer wall, right, which would be right there. And there, it's in place. One more thing I want to do is give this some color, fill. I'm going to do that using the hatch tool, as you might guess. So let's go hatch, and let's make our walls kind of a darker gray. So I'll go to the color here. And you'll see, if you go to the library there, you'll see there's a gazillion different hatch patterns you can use. Okay, so let's make this a dark gray. Okay. All right, now I've got to select the area, so I'm going to select the space between these lines. And you can see that fills that with a hatch. Okay. And you can see that it respects the boundaries of the door that we put in there. All right, so I'll type return to tell it I'm done. Let's make our hatch and walls, inner and outer wall surface, rectangle representing inner and outer wall, a group. And there you have it. So let me now save this. So I'm going to go to File, Save, and we'll make this 463 exercise EX4.2, and we'll make it TJA. Okay. And I'll go save. All right, and I can come back and let's go back to layer 0, and we'll go show our benches. We'll show the conveyor. We'll show our 5% females. And there you have it. The only thing left for you to do is add your blocks with the worker with 95 percentile stature on the opposite side of the conveyor. I hope this helps you complete this exercise.